Okay, so Acts 27. So if you watched the last video about being offended by the word of God, we were reading in Matthew 15 at one of the examples, and there's plenty of others where when Jesus was getting his ministry set up and he was working with people, he was working on them, he was talking to them, he was testing people's faith. Who would come after me and who wouldn't? Who had faith and who didn't? He wants to know whether you're really on his side or not. And he was checking them people out, and a lot of them got offended and turned away. Ironically, it was a lot of the Jewish people that got offended and turned away. But the Gentiles came to him, and he denied them, gave them some soft rebukes, but yet their faith was still strong, and they knew, this is the Lord. This is what I want. And it affected him. He's like, well, if they don't want me, I'm going to go to these people. We're going to make Israel jealous. It is because of Israel we have what we have. Thank God. Thank God, because otherwise we wouldn't have this chance. We wouldn't have this opportunity. So in this video, I want to talk about something that I noticed. We covered this in church today, Acts 27, and we've been working our way through the book of Acts. But there's something in here, and again, this is one of those things that most people don't catch. But it's these little details that jump out, these little shadows that allude to other things. It's the voyage to Rome begins. And when it was decided that we should sail to Italy, they delivered Paul and some other prisoners to one named Julius. Now, did you notice what he said there? This sounds like it's somebody on the outside telling the story. This is somebody who was there when it was happening. And when it was decided that we should sail to Italy, they delivered Paul and some of the prisoners to one named Julius, a centurion of the Augustan regiment. So I wonder who it was that was talking, because it wasn't Paul. They're talking about Paul in the third person. Who was there? Somebody was there watching this happen. A lot of people say, oh, that's just stories that were passed down. There's key words here that tell a different tale. So entering a ship of its Adramyttium, Greek name, I guess, Roman name, we put to sea, meaning to sail along the coast of Asia. Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, was with us. So this guy's telling a first-hand account of this story. He was on that boat. And the next day we landed at Sidon. And Julius treated Paul kindly and gave him liberty to go to his friends and receive care. When we had put to sea from there, we sailed under the shelter of Cyprus because the winds were contrary. So the time of year this was happening was probably September, October timeframe. So what was happening was the weather was changing, and they were getting northerns that were coming in, and it was they were having a hard time with shipping. When you're sailing and you understand how sailing works, you can't just point the boat the direction you want to go and cut the sail and hope to catch the wind. You have to zigzag, or you have to sail along the coast. When we had put to sea from there, we sailed under the shelter of Cyprus because the winds were contrary. And when we had sailed over the sea, which is off Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia. There the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing to Italy, and he put us on board. When we had sailed slowly many days and arrived with difficulty off Cnidus, the wind not permitting us to proceed, we sailed under the shelter of Crete off Salmone. Passing it with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens. I believe they found that place. It still exists over there, near the city of Lasea. Now, when much time had been spent and sailing was now dangerous because the fast was already over, Paul advised them, saying, men, I received that this voyage will end with disaster and much loss, not only of the cargo and ship, but also of our lives. Now, Paul was already well experienced and well versed in these things because he sailed back and forth constantly. So he probably had a foreboding of what was about to come. But we're going to see there was another reason why he knew this too. Nevertheless, the centurion was more persuaded by the helmsman and the owner of the ship than by the things spoken of by Paul. So money played a big factor here. We got to get this cargo delivered. We got to get this men delivered. They paid us for this. Maybe we got more money waiting. Who knows? So they were going after that aspect of it, when they should have just pulled into Fairhaven and hung out for a while. And because the harbor was not suitable to winter in, the majority advised to set sail from there also. It probably, like my pastor said today, it probably wasn't favorable for them because there were things there that they were looking for, things that weren't there that they were looking for. Could have been prostitutes, places to stay, who knows. At that time, it probably wasn't that big of a place either, so it's probably pretty packed. And because the harbor was not suitable to winter in, uh, so they couldn't stay there the whole time, I guess. The majority advised to set sail from there also, if by any means they could reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete opening toward the southwest and northwest, and winter there. So they needed to try to get there because in those places they were had a lot more shelter and it would be easier to protect the cargo and have places to stay and stuff like that. Because when you wintered somewhere at a harbor, because the Mediterranean is rough in the wintertime. But if you were going to winter in a harbor back then, you usually people would take jobs and they'd work and they'd help out here and there until they got things going and got ready to take off again in the spring. When the south wind blew softly, supposing that they had retained their desire, putting out to sea, they sailed close by Crete. But not long after, a tempestuous headwind arose called Euroclydon. I need to look up that name too, find out what that means. So when the ship was caught and could not head into the wind, we let her drive. So what they were doing is letting the current and the wind push the boat. The problem that was going on here is they were trying to sail north, but the winds in that were coming out of the north. Now this tempestuous headwind, it was a cyclone. It was cyclonic in nature. So there wasn't a way, huge north, and there wasn't a way they were going to be able to sail up there because trying to zigzag along the coast, they were just going to run aground, they were going to get hung up, or the seas were going to tear the boat apart. So it would make more sense for them to have pulled in somewhere, but we're going to see that that didn't work out that way. And running under the shelter of an island called Clauda, we secured the skiff with difficulty. Now, the skiff was the boat they drug behind them, so if something happened, they could jump in it and go to shore, or if they needed to check things out, they could jump in it and go to shore. So they were trying to get it back up on the ship before they lost it. When they had taken it on board, they used cables to undergird the ship, and fearing lest they should run aground on the Syrtis sands, they struck sail and were driven, and so were driven. So what this is they take ropes or cabling, whatever they had, they would run it under the ship and come up the other side and tie it off. And what that did was that squeezed it and held the ship together because the way they used their fasteners, and that a lot of it was wooden dowels, and in the seas like that, it could flex the boat, cause it to take water, or cause it to break apart. So we're trying to keep it from doing that. That's just the seas were horrible and was beating them up. A lot of boats are laying at the bottom down there in the Mediterranean because of that. So, fearing lest they should run aground on the Syrtis sands, probably some sandbars, they struck sail and were so driven. So they popped the sail up and see what they could do. And because we were exceedingly tempest-tossed the next day, they lightened the ship. So now they're taking the cargo and the junk and throwing it off so they don't go under. On the third day, we threw the ship's tackle overboard with our own hands. Now, this is bad because they need that to sail the boat. I think at this point, the sails were almost useless. Now, when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest beat on us, all hope that we would be saved was finally given up. So, you can see this was probably God working on them. And he was trying to show them something. But watch this. But after a long abstinence from food, then Paul stood in the midst of them and said, Men, you should have listened to me, and not have sailed from Crete and incurred this disaster and loss. At this point, they probably lost almost everything but their lives in the boat. And now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For there stood by me this night an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve, saying, Do not be afraid, Paul. You must be brought before Caesar, and indeed God has granted you all those who sail with you. This is important 2 verses, because a lot of people say after Paul was converted, they deny Paul's writings. After Paul was converted, nobody ever witnessed Jesus being with him. This is an account of Jesus standing with him. So look what he says again. For there stood by me this night an angel of the God of whom I belong and whom I serve. Where else have you seen that the angel of God mentioned? And it's referring to Jesus Christ. Do not be afraid, Paul. You must be brought before Caesar. And indeed, God has granted you all those who sail with you. So this was Christ that was standing with him. So a lot of people miss this. A lot of people don't catch these little details. That Christ was with Paul throughout his ministry because he was reaching the greater number of people being sent to the Gentiles. And he was also being used to prove to Rome and Greece and all kinds of other places, because he was everywhere, spreading the gospel and getting the church kicked off in that part of the world and outward. Therefore, take heart, men, for I believe God that it will be just as it was told me. So here we go. Here's faith. Okay, I believe it. Good to go. However, we must run aground on a certain island. Now, at this point, they were probably like, yay! However, we must run aground on a certain island. Oh. Now, when the 14th night had come, so these guys, 14 days and nights, they've been sitting out here in this water, being thrown all over the place. You can imagine they didn't get any sleep. As we were driven up and down in the Atlantic Sea, so the sails were no good. They're just being pushed by the current back and forth. About midnight, the sailors sensed that they were drawing near some land. And they took soundings and found it to be 20 fathoms. And when they had gone a little further, they took soundings again and found it to be 15 fathoms. Then, fearing lest we should run aground on the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for day to come. So what they were hoping for now at this point, since they know they were getting close to land, they were hoping that, well, we'll drop anchor and hold ourselves here. And if they use 4, nowadays people use 2 anchors on normal boats when there's wind. Use 4 anchors to hold the ship steady until the daylight comes so they could see what was going on. They still had the rudder so they could steer the ship if they needed to. And as the sailors were seeking to escape from the ship, when they had let down the skiff into the sea under pretense of putting out anchors from the prow, Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved. Now, it may be hard to see this, and I'll read a little more, but it may be hard to see this. But do you see the shadow? Unless these men stay in Christ, they will not be saved. Unless these men stay in the gospel, they will not be saved. See, where there's little shadows like this all over the Bible that lead to these things. And it's really funny to see this because they're being taught this very same lesson. Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the skiff and let it fall off. And as day was about to dawn, Paul implored them all to take food, saying, today is the 14th day. You have waited and continued without food and eaten nothing. Therefore, I urge you to take nourishment, for this is for your survival, since not a hair will fall from the head of any of you. And when he had said these things, he took bread, gave thanks to God in the presence of them all, and when he had broken it, he began to eat. So, at this point, they were probably doing everything he was doing, thinking this is what we need to do to make God happy. Then they were all encouraged and also took food for themselves. If Paul, the man of God, is eating, then it's good for us to do it. And in all, we were 276 persons on the ship. Interesting that there's a specific number in here. And that'd be a good another study to look up. So when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship and threw out the wheat into the sea. When it was day, they did not recognize the land, but they observed a bay with a beach onto which they planned to run the ship if possible. This is a common practice. You find a beach where you can get straight up in there, you just run it in as hard as you can, get it up on the beach, get out, let things happen that happen. That usually they'll build up a bunch of bulwarks to hold it in. Then when the time comes, they dig out around it and they push it back out in the water. And they let go the anchors and left them in the sea, and that was expensive. Meanwhile, loosing the rudder ropes, and they hoisted the mainsail to the wind and made for shore. So they were going to try to drive it in there as hard as they could. But striking a place where 2 seas met, they ran the ship aground, and the prow struck fast and remained immovable. But the stern was being broken up by the violence of the waves. So basically, they hit a big sandbar. 2 seas met there, and debris collided, and it created a shallow spot. I guess they probably couldn't see it because the seas were so dirty from the wind. So they hit it and buried the front of it so deep in there that they couldn't move it. So now the seas are tearing the back of the ship off. And the soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners lest any of them should swim away and escape. But the centurion, wanting to save Paul, this centurion may have actually ended up being saved, kept them from their purpose and commanded that those who could swim should jump overboard first and get to land, and the rest, some on boards and some on parts of the ship. And so it was that they all escaped safely to land. So they lost the boat. They lost everything in there. But do you see there's all kinds of different shadows hidden in this that lead to different things. persecutions, trials and tribulations, um, prisoner of Christ, uh, you know, being shipwrecked in life, being left alone, relying on God. There's lots of, I see them. There's lots of little things in here that allude to other things. So I wanted to share that with you guys, because there's it's just incredible to me how much little detail is that hints to other things. And what it does is it confirms what we already know in these other things. Precept upon precept. Verse supports verse. The Word of God stands on its own authority. And again, more proof of it right here. But I would really be interested to know who that was writing this story down. Because they were on that boat. And it wasn't Paul. And it wasn't the centurion. That would be interesting to find that out. Anyway, love you guys. Hope this video blessed you. Hope something jumped out at you to give you inspiration to go and do your own study on that, because you may get a revelation I didn't cover in here. And that's actually what I hope happened. Bless y'all in Jesus' name, and I'll see you in the next video.